Every man who refuses to marry receives the same diagnosis from society: commitment issues, fear of intimacy, emotional immaturity, psychological damage from childhood, Peter Pan syndrome, toxic masculinity preventing vulnerability. The list goes on. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Maybe the diagnosis is backwards. Maybe the man who looks at modern relationships, runs the cost-benefit analysis with clear eyes, and decides the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Maybe he's the healthiest person in the room. Maybe he's the only one not suffering from delusion. Nietzsche had a term for the psychological gymnastics people perform to make themselves feel superior while actually being weak. He called it ressentiment. It's what happens when you can't achieve something, so instead of admitting that, you convince yourself you never wanted it anyway. Or better yet, you convince yourself that the people who don't want it are somehow defective. And that's exactly what's happening with the social shaming of single men. Society has created a game where the rules keep changing, where the risks keep increasing, where the rewards keep diminishing. And then when rational men look at this game and say no thanks, society doesn't question the game. Society questions the men, calls them broken, calls them afraid, calls them less than. Because if society admitted the truth, if it acknowledged that marriage and relationships have become genuinely bad deals for many men, the entire social structure would have to confront some very uncomfortable realities about how it treats men and what it actually offers them. Right now, in this moment, millions of men are being told there's something wrong with them because they're not desperate to enter relationships that statistically have a good chance of ending badly. They're being pathologized for having standards, for wanting peace, for choosing solitude over drama, for preferring their own company to settling for whatever's available. And the language used to describe these men isn't neutral. It's not just that they prefer being single. No, they have commitment issues. They're emotionally unavailable. They're running from intimacy. They're stunted. They're incomplete. The entire framework assumes that coupling is the natural, healthy state, and anything else is deviation requiring explanation and correction. But Nietzsche would flip that assumption on its head. He'd ask why we assume that merging your life with another person's is automatically superior to maintaining your individual sovereignty. Why we treat independence as a problem to be solved rather than a legitimate choice to be respected. Why we pathologize men for making rational decisions based on observable reality rather than romantic fantasy. And when you start asking those questions, when you really interrogate the assumptions behind the shaming, the whole edifice starts to crumble. Let's start with the obvious. The shaming of single men isn't random. It's not just some cultural quirk that developed organically. It's systematic, it's intentional, and it serves specific purposes that have nothing to do with the well-being of individual men. First purpose is social reproduction. Society needs the next generation, needs babies born and raised. And for that, society needs men to commit to women, to help raise children, to transfer resources from male earners to family units. When men opt out, when they keep their resources for themselves, when they refuse to participate in generational reproduction, that's a problem for society. Not for the individual man necessarily, but for the collective. So society applies pressure, makes single men feel defective, makes them feel like they're failing at something fundamental, creates an environment where staying single requires constantly justifying yourself, constantly defending your choices against the assumption that you're doing something wrong. Second purpose is economic. Married people consume more. They buy houses, they buy cars, they buy furniture and appliances and all the products marketed to families. They take on debt. They participate more fully in the economic system. Single men, especially those who've embraced minimalism or simple living, they're not generating nearly as much economic activity. They're not as profitable. So of course the economic system, which shapes culture through advertising and media, of course it's going to push narratives that make single living seem inferior to coupled living. Third purpose is control, which we touched on in the Machiavelli video, but it bears repeating here. Men with families are predictable. They need stability. They can't take risks. They have to show up and perform regardless of how they feel about it because people depend on them. They're locked into the system. Single men are wild cards. They can quit jobs that disrespect them. They can relocate on a whim. They can reduce their expenses and work less. They can pursue passions that don't generate income. They can dedicate themselves to creative or intellectual or physical pursuits that contribute nothing to GDP. They can't be leveraged as easily, can't be controlled through the normal mechanisms. So society needs them to settle down, take on obligations, become responsible, which really means become controllable. And the shaming is part of that enforcement mechanism. It's society trying to herd outliers back toward the norm because the system functions better when everyone's playing the same game by the same rules. But here's where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes absolutely surgical in cutting through the bullshit. Nietzsche understood that morality isn't handed down from heaven. It's created by human beings to serve human purposes. And not just any human purposes, but specifically the purposes of whoever has the power to shape cultural narratives. He distinguished between master morality and slave morality. Master morality is created by the strong for the strong. It celebrates power, independence, excellence, the ability to stand apart from the herd and define your own values. Slave morality is created by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. It celebrates humility, selflessness, conformity, equality. It makes virtues out of weakness and calls strength a vice. Now apply this framework to the shaming of single men. What's happening? Men who maintain their independence, who refuse to compromise their sovereignty, who stand apart from the social script. They're being attacked using slave morality. They're being called selfish, which in slave morality is one of the worst insults. They're being told they're afraid of commitment, which frames their independence as cowardice rather than choice. They're being told they need to grow up, which assumes that maturity equals conformity to social expectations. All of this is slave morality trying to tear down men who are exhibiting master morality, trying to shame them back into the herd because their independence is a threat to the collective. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because the people doing the shaming, they're not consciously evil. They genuinely believe what they're saying. They've internalized slave morality so completely that they can't even see it as morality. They think it's just obvious truth. Obvious that people should want relationships. Obvious that single people must be unhappy or broken. Obvious that life's purpose involves pairing off and reproducing. They can't conceive of alternative value systems because they've never examined their own assumptions. Nietzsche called this being asleep, going through life unconscious, accepting inherited values without question, never becoming who you truly are because you never questioned who you were told to be. And the sleepers hate being confronted with someone who's awake, someone who looked at the inherited script and said, "This doesn't serve me, I'm writing my own." Because that wakefulness is a mirror showing them their own unconsciousness, showing them that they made choices without really choosing, that they're living lives they never consciously decided to live. And rather than wake up, which is painful and difficult, they attack the person holding up the mirror. They shame him, call him broken, call him afraid, anything to avoid confronting the possibility that he might have seen something they're still blind to. Think about the specific shaming tactics used against single men, and notice how they all assume the same thing, that the man wants a relationship but can't get one or can't maintain one. He has commitment issues, assumes he wants to commit but something's blocking him. He's afraid of intimacy, assumes he wants intimacy but fear prevents it. He hasn't found the right person yet, assumes he's looking and just failing. He's been hurt before, assumes past trauma explains current choices. Every explanation pathologizes the choice to remain single. Every explanation assumes there's something wrong that needs fixing. But what if none of that is true? What if he's looked at relationships clearly, understood exactly what they entail, calculated the costs and benefits honestly, and concluded that for him personally, the costs outweigh the benefits? What if he's not broken? What if he's not afraid? What if he's not still looking? What if he's made a conscious, rational choice based on self-knowledge and observation of reality? That possibility doesn't exist in the cultural narrative because admitting it would mean admitting that relationships aren't automatically good for everyone, that the social script isn't universally beneficial, that the system might be offering a bad deal, and society can't admit that without unraveling. Nietzsche talked about the herd and herd morality. The herd needs everyone to be roughly the same, needs everyone following the same values, pursuing the same goals, validating each other's choices. Because when everyone's doing the same thing, no one has to question whether it's the right thing. It's just normal. It's just what people do. But when someone breaks from the herd, when someone demonstrates that alternatives exist and can lead to satisfaction or even happiness, that's destabilizing. That makes everyone else nervous, makes them question their own choices, makes them wonder if they're missing out on something. So the herd's response is to attack the outlier, to shame them back into conformity, to insist that the different path is actually inferior, actually a mistake, actually a sign of dysfunction. This isn't conscious conspiracy. It's emergent behavior. It's how human groups maintain cohesion, by punishing deviation, by making the alternative paths uncomfortable enough that most people won't take them. And the shaming of single men is a perfect example of this dynamic in action. Now let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in daily life. You're a man in your 30s, successful career, good health, interesting hobbies, solid friend group. You're content. You've built a life you enjoy. You're not lonely. You're not desperate. You've simply chosen to prioritize your own development and freedom over romantic relationships. And constantly, from every direction, you get questions. When are you going to settle down? Haven't you found anyone yet? Don't you want kids? Aren't you lonely? You should get on the apps. You should put yourself out there more. You're too picky. You're going to regret this when you're older. You're going to end up alone. And notice something about all these questions and statements. None of them take your actual contentment seriously. None of them consider that you might have good reasons for your choices. None of them respect your agency as an adult making decisions about your own life. They all assume you're making a mistake, that you're deluding yourself about being happy, that future you will regret present you's choices. It's relentless low-level psychological pressure designed to make you second-guess yourself, designed to create doubt where there was certainty, designed to make you feel like something's wrong with you for being satisfied with a life that doesn't match the template. And here's the insidious part. It works. Even men who are genuinely happy being single, even men who have consciously chosen this path and have no regrets, they still feel the pressure, still feel like they have to justify themselves, still feel a little bit of shame or defensiveness when the topic comes up. Because humans are social creatures. We're wired to care what our tribe thinks of us. We're wired to feel uncomfortable when we're out of step with group norms. Evolution didn't prepare us to be comfortable as outliers. So even when we're intellectually certain of our choices, even when we can rationally defend them, we still feel the emotional weight of social disapproval. And society knows this. Society uses this. The shaming doesn't have to convince you intellectually that you're wrong. It just has to make you uncomfortable enough that eventually you conform to make the discomfort stop. That's the game. And Nietzsche would tell you that resisting that pressure, maintaining your choices in the face of constant social disapproval, that requires tremendous strength. That's actually the harder path, not the easier one. The easy path is conforming, doing what everyone expects, getting the approval and validation that comes with following the script. The hard path is standing alone, defining your own values, living by your own standards, and enduring the judgment of people who can't understand why you choose differently than they did. Let me share something crucial about Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman. This isn't about being superior to other people. It's about overcoming yourself. Specifically, overcoming the parts of yourself that are just social conditioning. The parts that want approval more than truth. The parts that would rather conform than be authentic. The parts that need external validation to feel okay about your choices. The Übermensch creates his own values rather than accepting inherited ones. Lives according to his own internal compass rather than society's map. And this is terrifying to society, because society's power depends on people needing its approval. When you stop needing that approval, when you genuinely don't care what the herd thinks of your choices, you've broken free from one of the primary mechanisms of social control. You've become dangerous in the way that only truly free people are dangerous. Not because you're going to hurt anyone, but because your existence proves that the system is optional, that the script can be rejected, that alternatives exist, And if you can do it, others might try. And if enough people try, the whole structure of social control starts to crack. This is why society doesn't just disagree with men who choose to stay single. It pathologizes them, makes them objects of pity or concern, treats their choice as a symptom rather than a decision. Because disagreement implies two legitimate positions, implies that maybe both sides have valid points, but pathologizing eliminates that possibility. If you're sick, if you're damaged, if you're dysfunctional, then your position isn't valid, it's just a symptom of your illness. And the appropriate response isn't to engage with your arguments, but to treat your condition, to fix you, to bring you back to health, which conveniently means back to conformity. This is how society shuts down dissent without having to actually address the substance of the dissent. Just declare the dissenter unwell, and suddenly you don't have to take their position seriously. And what's particularly Nietzschean about this whole dynamic is how it inverts strength and weakness. The man who stays single despite enormous social pressure, who maintains his boundaries despite constant challenges to them, who builds a satisfying life outside the approved template that takes real strength, real independence of mind, real courage to stand against the current. But society frames this as weakness, as fear, as inability, as failure. Meanwhile, the man who does what everyone expects, who follows the standard script, who never questions whether it's right for him, who conforms because conforming is easier than resisting, he's celebrated as mature, as successful, as having his life together. The weak are called strong, the strong are called weak. It's a perfect example of what Nietzsche meant by the transvaluation of values. Society has flipped everything upside down to serve its own interests rather than truth. And most people never notice because they're inside the inversion. They've accepted the inverted values as natural, as obvious, as just the way things are. Let's dig into the specific accusations thrown at single men, because each one reveals something about the society doing the accusing. First, the commitment-phobe label. This assumes that commitment is inherently valuable, that the ability and willingness to commit is a measure of maturity and health. But Nietzsche would ask, commitment to what? Commitment for what purpose? Is commitment to a bad relationship better than no commitment at all? Is staying in something unfulfilling somehow nobler than leaving? Society acts as if commitment itself is the virtue, regardless of what you're committing to. As if the ability to stay in any relationship proves something admirable about your character. But that's insane. That's treating commitment as an end in itself, rather than a means to an end. A man who refuses to commit to relationships that don't serve him, who maintains high standards for what he'll bind himself to, that's not commitment phobia. That's discernment. That's having standards. That's respecting himself enough to not settle. But society can't frame it that way because then they'd have to admit that maybe a lot of people are committed to relationships they shouldn't be in. That maybe the commitment they're so proud of is actually just sunk cost fallacy and fear of starting over. Second accusation is emotional unavailability. This one's particularly insidious because it's unfalsifiable. If you're single, you must be emotionally unavailable. How do we know you're emotionally unavailable? Because you're single. It's circular reasoning dressed up as psychological insight. But what does emotionally available even mean? In practice, it seems to mean being willing to merge your emotional life with someone else's. Being willing to make someone else's feelings your responsibility. Being willing to prioritize someone else's emotional needs over your own boundaries. And if you're not willing to do that, if you maintain emotional sovereignty, if you have boundaries that you won't cross even for a relationship, then you're emotionally unavailable. But Nietzsche would say that's not unavailability. That's self-possession. That's having a self solid enough that it doesn't need to dissolve into someone else. That's emotional strength, not weakness. The man who needs a relationship to feel emotionally complete, who can't be happy alone, who defines himself through his romantic partnerships. That's emotional weakness masquerading as availability. But society celebrates it because weak, dependent people are easier to control and predict than strong, independent ones. Third accusation is that you haven't found the right person yet. This one's particularly patronizing because it assumes you're still looking, that you're on the same quest as everyone else, you've just been unlucky so far. It can't conceive of the possibility that you've stopped looking, that you evaluated the whole enterprise and decided it wasn't worth pursuing, that you've got better things to do with your time and energy than dating. Because if you've genuinely stopped looking, if you're not just waiting for the right person but actively choosing not to pursue relationships at all, that breaks the script so completely that most people can't process it. So they tell themselves you're still looking, you just haven't found them yet. You will when you're ready. You'll meet someone when you least expect it. It'll happen when you stop trying. All these platitudes that assume you want what they want, you're just on a different timeline. They literally cannot absorb the information that you might not want it at all. Their worldview doesn't have a category for that. Fourth accusation, you're afraid. Afraid of intimacy, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of commitment, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of something. This one's especially revealing because it assumes that if you understood relationships correctly, if you weren't being held back by fear, you'd obviously want one. The only possible explanation for not wanting what society says you should want is irrational fear. Not preference, not different values, not different cost-benefit calculations. Fear. It's the ultimate dismissal. Because if you're acting from fear, your choices don't have to be taken seriously. Fear is irrational. Fear distorts judgment. So if society can frame your choice as fear-based, it doesn't have to engage with the actual reasoning behind your choice. Doesn't have to consider that maybe you've seen some things they haven't. Maybe you've understood some dynamics they're blind to. Maybe you've calculated differently and come to different conclusions. No, you're just afraid. And the solution to fear is courage, which in this case means doing what society wants you to do anyway. Convenient how that works. But here's what Nietzsche understood that modern society seems to have forgotten. Not all fears are irrational. Sometimes fear is wisdom. Sometimes fear is your survival instinct telling you that danger is real. And when a man looks at modern relationships and feels hesitation, feels resistance, feels an instinct to avoid, maybe that's not pathology. Maybe that's healthy pattern recognition. Maybe that's his subconscious doing the math faster than his conscious mind and coming up with run. Look at divorce statistics. Look at false accusation dynamics. Look at family court biases. Look at the way men are treated in relationships versus how they're expected to perform in relationships. Look at the constant message that masculinity is toxic, that male sexuality is predatory, that men need to do better while women are fine as they are. A man absorbs all this information, consciously and unconsciously, and concludes that entering a relationship is accepting a tremendous amount of risk for uncertain rewards. Is that fear, or is that rational risk assessment? Society calls it fear because that's easier than admitting the relationship landscape has become genuinely hostile to men in ways that make avoidance reasonable. Nietzsche wrote about how society uses guilt and shame to control people who would otherwise escape its control. You make them feel bad about their natural instincts. Make them feel guilty for wanting what they want. Make them feel ashamed for not wanting what they're supposed to want. And then you offer them redemption through conformity. You can stop feeling bad if you just do what we're telling you to do. If you just accept the values we're pushing. If you just live the life we've designed for you. It's psychological manipulation dressed up as help, as concern for your well-being, as wanting what's best for you. But it's really about bringing you back into the fold, back into controllable, predictable patterns, back into the herd where you belong. And the shaming of single men fits this pattern perfectly. Make them feel defective. Make them feel like they're missing out. Make them feel like they're failures at something fundamental. Create enough psychological discomfort that conforming seems like relief. That's the game. And what makes this particularly cruel is that it works even on men who are genuinely happy, even on men who have examined their choices consciously and stand by them completely. Because humans aren't perfectly rational. We're social creatures with emotional needs for belonging and approval. We can know intellectually that we're making the right choice, while still feeling emotionally bruised by constant social disapproval. We can be certain of our path while still feeling moments of doubt when everyone around us insists we're wrong. And society exploits this gap between intellectual certainty and emotional vulnerability, uses it to plant seeds of doubt, to create moments of weakness where conformity looks appealing just to make the pressure stop. Nietzsche called this the spirit of gravity. the weight of social expectation pulling you down, trying to make you heavy where you could be light, trying to make you earthbound where you could soar, and resisting that gravity, maintaining your flight path despite the constant pull downward. That requires what he called lightness, the ability to laugh at social pressure, to not take society's judgments seriously, to be so secure in your own values that external disapproval bounces off. But here's something crucial that needs to be said. The shaming doesn't just come from society in the abstract. It comes from specific people with specific motivations, and understanding those motivations helps you resist the shaming. Married people shame single men because your choice implies theirs might not be the only valid option. Your contentment challenges their assumption that marriage is necessary for happiness. If you're happy alone, what does that say about their need to be coupled? So they need you to be unhappy, need you to be broken, need your singleness to be a problem rather than a choice. Because if it's a valid choice, they might have to examine their own choices more carefully than they want to. Women shame single men because men opting out of relationships affects women's options and leverage. If enough men decide relationships aren't worth it, that changes the entire dating market, changes women's ability to be selective, changes the terms of engagement. So there's genuine self-interest in shaming men back into pursuing relationships, in making them feel defective for not wanting what women are offering, in maintaining the narrative that men need relationships more than women do, even though data suggests the opposite. Parents shame single adult children because grandchildren, because the continuation of the family line, because their image of what their child's life should look like, because they want to see you settled before they die. All understandable motivations maybe, but all still about what they want for you rather than what you want for yourself. Friends shame single men out of a kind of projection. They need you to want what they want, so they can feel secure in their own choices. If you've found a different path that works, that makes their path look less inevitable, less like the only option, so they need to delegitimize your path to validate their own. None of these people are necessarily being malicious. They probably genuinely think they're helping you, genuinely think they know better than you what will make you happy. But they're all operating from their own perspectives, their own needs, their own assumptions, and none of them are living your life. None of them have your particular psychology, values, experiences, goals. So why should their opinions about your life choices carry more weight than your own direct experience of what makes you happy? Nietzsche had this idea about eternal recurrence that's relevant here. If you had to live your life exactly as it is, every moment, every choice over and over for eternity, could you embrace that? Could you say yes to your life as you're actually living it? Not as you wish it were, not as society says it should be, but as it actually is. That's the test of whether you're living authentically, whether your choices genuinely reflect your values. And for many married people, they couldn't pass that test. They couldn't embrace their marriages for eternity because their marriages aren't that good. They're enduring them, not celebrating them. They're making the best of situations they're not entirely happy with. But admitting that is painful. It means acknowledging that maybe they made mistakes. Maybe they settled. Maybe they're not living the lives they truly want. So instead of facing that pain, they project it onto single people. They insist that you must be unhappy, so they don't have to examine their own happiness too closely. They need you to be worse off than them, so they can feel okay about where they are. It's ressentiment again. The resentment of people who can't achieve something, projecting that resentment as moral superiority. Here's what single men need to understand. The shaming isn't about you. It's never been about you. It's about the shamers, about their insecurities, their need for validation, their inability to conceive of value systems different from their own, their investment in narratives that make their choices seem inevitable rather than optional. When someone tells you you're going to die alone, that's not wisdom. That's a threat disguised as concern. It's them trying to scare you into conforming, because your non-conformity makes them uncomfortable. When someone tells you you'll regret not having kids, they're not sharing insight. They're projecting their own fears of regret onto you. When someone tells you you haven't grown up, they're defining maturity as conformity and immaturity as independence, because that's the only framework that makes sense of their own choices. None of it is actually about you and your well-being. It's all about them and their need to feel okay about their own paths by delegitimizing yours. And once you see this, once you really understand that the shaming is projection and insecurity rather than genuine concern, it loses most of its power. You stop taking it personally. You stop internalizing it. You stop letting it create doubt, because you understand it's not actually a commentary on your choices. It's a revelation about the person doing the shaming, about what they need to believe to feel okay about themselves. And you can have compassion for that, without letting it influence your decisions. You can understand why married people need to believe marriage is the only path to happiness, without accepting that belief as truth. You can understand why parents want grandchildren, without making your reproductive choices about fulfilling their wants. You can understand why friends need you to want what they want, without abandoning your own values to make them comfortable. Understanding doesn't require agreement, and compassion doesn't require compliance. Nietzsche talked about the death of God as this moment when humanity would have to create its own values, rather than receiving them from divine authority. And while most people haven't consciously noticed God's death, they're still looking for external authorities to tell them how to live. They've just replaced God with society, with cultural norms, with what everyone else is doing. They're still looking outside themselves for validation and guidance rather than inside. And the man who chooses to stay single despite social pressure, who defines his own values rather than accepting inherited ones, who builds a life based on his own assessment of what matters rather than society's script, that man is engaging in exactly the kind of self-creation that Nietzsche celebrated. He's not waiting for permission, not seeking approval, not conforming to make others comfortable. He's defining himself, creating his own meaning, living according to his own values. And that's terrifying to people who are still looking for external authorities to validate their choices. This is why the shaming is so intense. It's not just disagreement, it's existential threat. Your choice to live differently threatens the foundation of how other people have built their lives. If you can be happy without relationships, their relationships aren't necessary. If you can find meaning without children, their children aren't the ultimate meaning they've been telling themselves. If you can be content alone, their fear of loneliness that drove major life decisions was maybe not as rational as they thought. Your existence as a counterexample undermines the certainty they need to feel okay about paths they can't easily undo. So they attack, they shame, they pathologize. Not because there's actually something wrong with you, but because your difference reveals possibilities they can't psychologically afford to consider. Because if your path is valid, they might have taken the wrong path, and that's too painful to contemplate. So they destroy the alternative rather than question their own choices. But here's the beautiful part. The more secure you become in your own choices, the more immune you become to this dynamic. When you know, really know, that you're living according to your own values, when you've examined your choices consciously and stand by them completely, when you've tested yourself and found your reasons solid, other people's opinions become just noise. Interesting maybe, sometimes even useful feedback, but not determinative, not threatening, not able to create doubt. You've become what Nietzsche called a yes-sayer. Someone who can say yes to their own life without needing anyone else's permission or approval. Someone who has overcome the need for external validation. Someone who is genuinely free in the most profound sense. Free not just from physical constraints, but from psychological ones. Free from the need to be understood. Free from the need to be approved of. Free from the need to fit in. Just free. And this freedom, this genuine independence, it changes how you move through the world. You stop explaining yourself. Stop justifying, stop defending. Because you don't need to convince anyone, you're not seeking approval, you're just living. And there's a power in that. A kind of unassailable strength that comes from being at peace with your choices regardless of what anyone thinks. People can sense it. They don't always know what they're sensing. But they know you're different. Know you're not playing the same games. Know you can't be manipulated through the normal pressure points. And some will be attracted to that strength. Will respect it even if they don't understand it. But others will be threatened by it. Will try harder to shame you. Will escalate their attacks. Because your imperviousness to their judgments is infuriating to people who are used to their judgments having power. It reveals their powerlessness, and people don't like feeling powerless. Nietzsche wrote that you have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, the only way, it does not exist. And this is fundamentally what the shaming of single men is trying to deny. Society wants to insist there is a right way, a correct way, a path that everyone should follow, and deviations from that path are wrong, are failures, are problems to be fixed. But that's a lie designed to maintain control. There is no one right way to live. There are different ways with different costs and benefits, different trade-offs, different values being prioritized, and the choice between them is genuinely individual. What works for one person might be disaster for another. What brings one person meaning might bring another misery. And pretending otherwise, insisting that everyone should want the same things and live the same way, that's not wisdom, that's tyranny. It's the herd trying to force everyone into the same mold regardless of individual difference. And the men who resist this, who choose their own paths despite the pressure, who build lives that work for them rather than lives that look right to others, these men are doing something genuinely courageous, something genuinely difficult, because going against the current, standing alone, enduring judgment and shame and constant pressure to conform, that takes real strength, real independence of mind, real commitment to living authentically rather than performing for approval. Society calls these men weak, calls them afraid, calls them broken. But that's inversion again. These are actually the strongest men, the ones with enough courage to stand alone, enough self-knowledge to know what they actually want rather than what they're supposed to want, enough integrity to choose truth over comfort, enough strength to endure social disapproval rather than compromise their values. These are the men Nietzsche was writing for, the ones who could hear his message, who could understand it, who could live it. So here's what I want from you right now. Drop a comment with this exact phrase, I define my own path. Not for engagement, though I appreciate it, but because saying it publicly, even in a YouTube comment section, is a small act of defiance against the pressure to conform. It's you claiming your right to live according to your own values rather than society's script. It's you acknowledging that the shaming is illegitimate, that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your choices, that your life is yours to create. So do it now. Write I define my own path in the comments. Let that be your declaration. Subscribe to this channel because we're exploring ideas that challenge everything society taught you to believe. We're questioning assumptions that most people never examine. We're building a community of people who value truth over comfort and authenticity over approval. Hit that like button because content like this, content that directly challenges social narratives about how you should live, that takes courage to create, and your like signals that there's an audience for genuine philosophical depth. What's coming next will shake your understanding of ambition and success even more fundamentally. I'm going to reveal how the achievement you're chasing, the recognition you're seeking, the status you're building, all of it is a trap designed to keep you running on a wheel that goes nowhere. How the very definition of success you've internalized is constructed to benefit everyone except you. This next video will make you question whether anything you've accomplished actually matters, or whether you've just been playing someone else's game by someone else's rules for someone else's benefit. Make sure you're subscribed because what you're about to learn will change how you see everything you've worked for and everything you're still working toward. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. And once you see it, you can finally start working toward something real.